Hi, everyone. Welcome to the How We Hustle podcast.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Tanya. And we invite you to join us in our unfiltered conversation about the real life hustle of being an entrepreneur. For more information about the podcast, check out howwehustlepodcast.com.
Make sure to check us out on Instagram at How We Hustle Podcast. You'll find information on new episodes as well as notable quotes from the episodes we do. So come check us out at How We Hustle Podcast on Instagram.
All right, so Tanya, I want to ask about stories because I've been kind of reading a lot about marketing, and I feel like some people are all about stories and some people are not. There's definitely a lot of like experts or gurus or whatever you want to call it that really promote this idea of telling your story, sharing with people how you were down and out, how you found the solution, found the secret, and then use that secret to transform yourself from being, down and out to not being down and out. It's kind of the classic story, right? And I don't necessarily know how I feel about that. I don't really know if making your personal story should really be the centerpiece of your marketing. I'm not sure. I'm kind of debating it and trying to figure out really how important is that personal down and out transformation story of yourself as the entrepreneur, service provider, business owner, coach, whatever. Does your client, for example, your clients, Tanya, you're a business coach, do your clients care, and do you use your own personal down and out story? And I would say, for your case, your down and out story would be I was working in a cubicle that I didn't like, or whatever that down and out story is. But how much do you want to lean on your own personal story in your marketing?
I personally do adhere to that. Not a ton, but I do think that it's important for people to feel connected to the person. And the only way for them to feel connected is for them to see themselves in your story. And that's how you build that trust factor. That's how you can say to someone, hey, I've been where you've been, and this is how I got from there to where I am now, which is where the person wants to be. So it's really sharing the parts of the story that connect with the person that you're trying to attract. And it's about telling stories that make them that show them that, one, that they can trust you, and two, that you guys are alike. Because it's very easy for us to look at someone else and think, oh, you don't know what it's like to be here. You've never had this. You've never been in this situation. And if we're not sharing those parts of our story, then people can assume that we had it easy, or that things just fell together, or that some stroke of luck just got us to this position, or we had tons of money going in, or all these different factors that make people feel like it's not possible for them. So what we're really doing is saying, I was where you were, and if it was possible for me, then it's possible for you, because we were in the same position and I can help you do that.
Right. So I think what you did there is you kind of flipped it on. You're telling a story about yourself, but really you're not making it about yourself. You're making it about your client, and you're making it about their outcomes. And I think that's really the key. But I think a lot of people don't do that. If I tune into a podcast, and I mentioned this, I think you're the same way. If I tune into a podcast with a guest that I'm interested in hearing, and they spend so much time talking about their story, but they're talking about their story as it's relates to them, not about the outcomes they provide. And I get so bored, and I find this is something that a lot of people are doing, and I don't really think, I think there's a very specific way to do it, where you are, as you said, talking about what you do through the use of story, but you're talking about what you do in terms of outcomes you create, and you're making it about your client. You're using your own story to make it about your client, and not really about yourself. But I actually see people that are no, talk about yourself. Talk about, I think it's one thing to tell your story and kind of let it be known. I know Russell Brunson talks about the epiphany, the epiphany that you had that allowed you to get from where you were to where you are. And that epiphany is important, but once again, you're really just sharing that for the sake of your client and their outcomes. You're not making it about yourself. And I think this is like a mistake that a lot of people are making. And it's like, just don't make that mistake because it's so boring, right? Like if I'm listening to content or reading something or whatever, or even like a Facebook Live video, people don't stick to this like rule where talk about your clients, and it's so boring, right? It just loses me.
So I also think, though, that there's a difference between who you're talking to, because I think that when people are not like they're thinking about getting started, but they haven't quite started yet, I think it inspires them, a word that I usually hate. It inspires them that like they can do it, and like maybe that they should take action on something, and just like hearing a ton of stories like is building their confidence that they can do it. But for us, like, we don't need that. Like, I don't need to hear all about somebody's struggles. And I think that there's a difference between, and like, there's a lot of people telling you out there that you should focus on the pain and focus on the struggle, because people move when they're in pain. Like, if your hand is on fire, you're going to move it. But if it's not on fire, then you're probably not going to move it. But I also find that like that does get boring, and eventually you're questioning like, what's the point here, and where are we going with this, and how can you help me? I think that there's a difference between spending a lot of time going backwards and using the past to tell you, like, inform you of what to do going forward. And I think that just a lot of people spend just too much time on the past. So it's more so about where did you come from, and then moving forward, like quickly get to the point, quickly get to like, why are you here? Like, what helped you? What helped you get here? And like, what do you have to say about that? What do you wish you knew is better than like focusing on where you were so much. And I think that there's just like a difference there for who are we speaking to. And, if you're going to a podcast for inspiration, then maybe that's what you want to hear. Maybe you want to hear the struggles that people went through. And maybe if it's a sales page, you don't really want to hear so much storytelling. You more want to get them to the point. And then if they still haven't made a decision, that's when you want to tell more stories, because you can illustrate a lot of what helped you. You can illustrate a lot of the point by telling stories, but it needs to have a point. It needs to be a purposeful story. Like, it has to tell a story that you want them to realize something, some sort of mindset shift that they need to have by hearing this story.
Yeah, that kind of made me realize the rule that I sort of use when I'm doing my own marketing. I try and think of this sort of heaven and hell, or hell and heaven dynamic, where I try and talk about everything in terms of heaven and hell. Like, what is the hell of, and then what is the heaven? So what's the hell that someone's in, and then what's the heaven that they want to be in? But what I really try not to talk about is, the process that takes you from one to the other. And I think when it comes to storytelling, like the bridge, right? Like, people are interested in where they are and where they can be, but not necessarily the process. And we've talked about this before. Like, people don't buy features, they buy outcomes.
Yeah, like, they're not going to buy how you're going to get them there. And that's the biggest mistake I think people spend so much time on, is how you're going to get me there, how much time it's going to take me, and what we're going to do to get there. And the thing is, they're not buying that. They're buying the outcome. So tell them about the outcome, focus mostly about the outcome that they're going to have, and how that's impacted your life, and how it's impacted other people, the world, your family. Like, talk about the impact, what's changed, rather than focusing so much on like, how did it change? How did you get there? Because eventually what happens is that people that are talking about that for a long time, it ends up sounding like a lot of work. And then people have all those objections about, well, I don't have that kind of time. I could never do that, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. What resonated for you there?
No, just like when you, I think this is the mistake a lot of people make. And I think this occurs in lots of forms. And like, I keep mentioning podcasts just because it's like I think it's a great example because I listen to podcasts all day long, and I can't stand it when I have to, spend the first 20 minutes of an episode listening to someone's bridge story. And it's like, I don't really care about that. I want to hear, where you were and then the outcomes you got. I don't, I don't want to get bored with all the story part that's just, not for me, that heaven and hell part, because it can get really dry, and I don't think it's engaging, and I think you lose people when you tell stories in that way.
But I also think that people think that that's what they want, right? People want to know, like, what is it that you did exactly? Just tell me exactly what you did, because then what happens is then they think, okay, now I'm going to just do exactly what they did, and then I'm going to get results. And that's not actually how it happens, because that's not the whole story. So they're not giving you the whole story of how they specifically did it. They're not giving you the step by step. So by listening to all these people tell their story, and even if they are focusing on the bridge now, you think, oh, I have everything I need to get started and I'm just going to go. Well, you're missing a lot of pieces of that puzzle. And so now you're getting set up for failure. And people are getting set up for failure and then thinking this is not going to work for me. And so I'm not going to hire that person, or I'm not going to do it this way. And that's what they don't realize, is that they're giving away the steps that they used. People are trying them, and then now they're not getting results.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think, like, when you're telling stories too, we've talked about this before, but when you just be yourself,
tell the vulnerable parts about it.
Yeah, that's what I was get at. Yeah. And I think that the vulnerable parts often
are feelings
have to do with, it's not the process. It's like, this is where I was at and
how I was feeling, because feelings are universal. We all know what anger and sadness and feeling depressed or feeling hopeless or an existential crisis, like these are feelings that you have, or feeling like stuck or pigeonholed or a prisoner. Like, these are feelings. How you felt is something that people have felt before, because even if it's slightly different feeling, we all connect with those words, however we feel them in our body. So if you talk more about how you felt and then how you feel now, or what's changed about how you feel, that's going to connect with people more than if you're focused so much on the things that happened, like the details of the story. The details are not important.
Right. And I think that's a really, really good point. And I think that's like a formula for the proper way to tell stories. And, once again, I think a lot of people don't follow this formula. And I think it's so powerful because people do really connect with vulnerability. I actually, we were talking about courses, you and I off the podcast. And I just thinking now is I bought this guy's course in December, this beta course. It was only a few $100s, but the reason I bought it was because he shared this story on some Facebook Live about how, he used to live in his car and like now he is helping whatever, right? But and I just thought of this now, but it was the vulnerable story of him saying that he used to live in his car and what that was like that really connected me with him. And then I bought his course and I haven't even really used it, but.
And like, same thing with my old coach. Like, my first coach, I hired her because she told a story about how she quit her job to do her online business, had to go back to her job and then quit again. And I'm like, if anybody has ever had to go back to corporate, like, they know how to avoid that in the future. So I was like, that's my kind of coach, right? I wanted the vulnerable story. And same thing, like sharing the things that you struggled with, or the things that you don't really want anyone to know, or the things you're embarrassed about, are the things that are going to connect with other people, because what's personal is universal. So we all go through similar things, even if you think you're the only person on the planet who's ever gone through that, or ever felt that way, or ever been in that situation. There are millions of other people on this planet that have felt that feel that right now. And because you have gotten out of that, you've come onto the other side, you can help those people.
Damn, nailed it.
Well, it's like the truth.
Yeah, no, that was good. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's like really So I guess the question I asked, because I was kind of figuring it out and looking at different messages, was like, how relevant are stories in marketing? And just like, kind of talking about this with you. Obviously, stories are so important, but there's really a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And so many people out there are just like driving me crazy by not doing it right. I don't want to say the right way, but just like being boring and not engaging and not connecting, right? There's like, if you're just real, transparent, not vulnerable is what I meant to say. If you're just real, transparent and vulnerable, and talk about where you were or what that was like, and then really focus it on your clients, their outcomes, where they want to get, and the results you'll get for them, then stories can be really powerful. But
don't focus on the process.
No.
Focus on the feelings.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap on another episode of How We Hustle. For more information, check out howwehustlepodcast.com.